Did you see him?
Yes. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see him, but I literally right outside my door, I saw, like, literally heard the shots, and there was 3 people dead, two right outside my door.
3 people dead outside your door inside the high school?
No, 3 people dead, I think, in total. 2 outside my door.
2 outside your door. Do you know about how many? Go ahead.
Feet outside my door. Feet outside my door.
So you heard the shots. About how many shots did you hear?
Too many to count.
Did it sound like automatic weapons fire, like a machine gun?
It sounded more like a pistol or like a shotgun more than a machine gun.
Did you hear any talking by the shooter?
No. I just heard screaming from people, obviously in shock, injured, maybe even resulting people dying. That's what the screams, that's what I heard.
So this was, you say, right outside your door. What did you do once you heard the shots? Were you locked inside that room?
Yes. The door was locked, and all the students got low to the ground. We went to the other side of the room where the door, you can't see in through the door, and all roughly 20 students in the class were just sitting underneath this desk with my teacher.
So you're sitting underneath the desk. Were you able to barricade the door?
No, we didn't have enough time, but fortunately, this teacher is one of the teachers that is very strictly enforces the locked door policy, which my school is trying to, especially since an event like this happens, but they've been trying to prevent an incident like this happening for now, like, over a couple months now.
So you've had drills for a shooting situation like this in the past?
Not any drills, but information pulled on us. But and actually, right when we came back from winter break, so not even a month ago, telling us about what we should do in case an incident like this were to ever happen.
And it's now 3:20. Do you know about what time this happened? What time you heard those shots?
So at around 2:20, 2:25 is when it started, and I'd say it probably ended around 2:30. Police were at our door by 2:45.
So that's about 25 minutes right there. This is still being described as an active shooter situation. Have you been told anything about the shooter, where he or she might be?
No.
And you're still in the classroom?
No. We had police invade the school, and we were taken out safely. We evacuated, and fortunately, my father was there to pick me up in the moment, and I rushed over to his car and evacuated to my house where I'm at right currently.
So you're at your house right now, so you're safe right now. Do you have any idea how many people were left in the school when you left?
Plenty. Hundreds, maybe even close to a couple thousand.
Because there's about 3,000 people in the high school, right?
Yes, maybe even more. And there was definitely, we were the first ones out since we were the closest to the parking lot.
And could you tell
where
if
first shots were taken?
You say you say the first shots were in the parking lot.
Like, no, like, we're near us, which we are close to the parking lot.
You're close to the parking lot. The first shots, as far as you know, were inside the school, right outside. You said you saw 2 bodies right outside the door of your classroom.
Yes. Right as we were evacuating, I saw 2 dead bodies.
Do you have any idea where the shooter went after that?
I heard shots coming from a class next door to, and then a couple more down, and then after that, I heard footsteps above us on the 2nd floor, and then from there, I can't tell you what happened.
Right. So you say the police got there about 25 minutes after the shooting began. Can you estimate it all? You said there were too many shots to count as well. Can you estimate it all for how long the shooting went on? About how many minutes?
I say maybe close to like 3.5, 4 minutes, from what I could hear, from where I could hear as well.
Right, but the shooter was, as far as you could tell, was also moving.
Yes.
Have you been in contact with any of your friends from inside the school?
No, I haven't. I just haven't had the time, but as soon as I got out and I saw some of my friends, it was one of the most emotional times I've ever experienced in my life, to see my friends are so safe. And as I was on the way home, I was checking my phone, and I just see so many messages of people just texting and calling. And as we're on the phone now, people are just calling and calling. And I'm pretty sure a lot of my friends are safe, yes. You
think most of your friends are safe? Did you know the students you saw outside your classroom? The victims?
Say it again?
Did you know the victims outside your classroom?
No, I didn't. Didn't get a good look.
We're watching. This is still a live picture. We're still seeing more of the students evacuated right now, people walking out with their hands up. It sounds like your teacher knew what to do in the moment.
Yes.
And I don't know if you've been able to see the text from any of your classmates, from anybody else at the school. Have you picked up any more information from those texts from your classmates? Any other information about possible injured or victims?
I've gathered that a couple people I know for sure are injured, and I guarantee you there's two dead. There was two dead on the floor as I was evacuating. I also know that one of my close family friends' sons had blood all over him. I can't tell you his name. I can't think of it in the moment. And as far as everybody in my class, we were all safe.
And you may not know the answer to this, but could you tell if it was one or more than one shooters?
I honestly can't tell you that. I have no idea, but I don't think it was multiple. If anything, it was probably a small number, one or two.
And you know that the shooter continued to go through. You heard shots from other parts of the school, but obviously did not come into your classroom at all. But you never saw the shooter walk by your classroom.
No, I do not have an appearance on what he looked like. Because
you were down on the ground. Well, well, Michael, thanks very much. That was very helpful to all of us. I'm going to let you get back to your friends and classmates right now. I hope we can call you back if you pick up any new information. But thank you very much. We are glad you're safe. And we're hoping for the best for all your classmates and schoolmates. I want to bring in Brad Garrett. As you're looking at live pictures there, Broward County, Florida, where there is an active shooter at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. Those are students being let out of this high school, about 3,000 in the school. We know, according to one of the eyewitnesses, that this shooting unfolded around 2:20 p.m. There northeast of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. According to Mark Katz, who was on the scene, the shooting went on for several minutes before police were able to arrive. Police on the scene right now, escorting students out. I'm going to bring in Brad Garrett, FBI Special Agent. It does appear, Brad, according to what Mark Katz was telling us, that they were pretty well trained in this school, perhaps preventing even worse bloodshed, but this looks like a very serious incident.
I think there's no question about how serious it is, George. And yes, training does save lives. Even if you don't have active drills, if you at least let the kids, and in particular the faculty, know exactly what to do, going back to those three words of run, hide, fight, and particularly the first two, run and hide, definitely get people away from the shooter and make it more difficult for him to get to you. Right,
and it does sound like that was followed. We are seeing evacuations continue now about an hour after the initial shooting. I want to go to Cecilia Vega at the White House. President has been briefed.
George, yes, just a few minutes ago, we did hear from White House Deputy Press Secretary Lindsay Walters, who told us that President Trump, who is here at the White House right now, has been briefed on this shooting in Florida. We're told that the White House is actively monitoring this situation, and of course, they extend their thoughts and prayers to those who are affected. Strangely enough, this is the second alert that this White House has had to send out like this today. The second time the president has been briefed on a shooting. Of course, earlier this morning, that incident at Fort Meade, and they sent a very similar statement out about that. We are expecting a briefing within the hour from Press Secretary Sarah Sanders. And of course, as you know, George, this very tragic incident comes as this White House is in turmoil right now over this Rob Porter scandal. So they've got a lot on their plate here today.
They have a lot going on there today, Cecilia. Okay, we'll get back to you soon. Victor Kendo, our correspondent in Florida right now, heading towards the high school. Victor, what can you tell us about what you're seeing, what the response has been like so far?
George, we're on our way up there right now, and the response, as you can imagine, you've got agencies, all the local ones up there in Broward County, just zeroing in on the school right now, and they're calling it right now a mass casualty incident. So somewhere between 20 and 50. You know how these incidents go, the numbers can always change. And unfortunately, the numbers tend to grow early on here.
Right. Where are you getting mass specifically? Who is saying this is a mass casualty incident?
That was from the Broward County Sheriff's Office, I believe. And it's as many as 20 to 50 victims right now. Not sure as far as fatalities. No official word on that yet. We're all scrambling for information right now. There's very little confirmed right now, but they are dealing with several patients. So 20 to 50 patients right now is the number that I'm getting on on the ground, but I'm making my way up there to that
Okay,
school.
well, we'll let you get there. As we see from the scene there, we see people being treated. We see some of the victims there on stretchers. According to Michael Katz, who was in the school when the shooting began, he personally saw 2 victims inside the high school. I want to go to our senior justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas. Federal response already?
George, we have FBI and ATF agents on the way to the scene. That gives you a sense of how potentially bad the situation is. We can see from the massive police presence outside that school that there's concern that the shooter is still at large. And I think that's the thing that has law enforcement particularly concerned right now, that this is not a contained event. We expect that the FBI will work closely with the Broward Sheriff's Department to get a handle on the situation. Right now, because you don't know that the shooter is contained, you're not quite sure how many people are involved in terms of this incident, it's very important to get the perimeter, as you see them doing, and get those kids out of that school.
That's right. What we see there is we see those armored vehicles. We saw SWAT teams earlier go in. Brad Garrett, according to Michael Katz, the one eyewitness we've been able to speak to so far, the shooting went on only for several minutes, but this is still being described as an active shooter situation. Try and tell us what those SWAT teams will be doing as they enter the school.
Well, one of the keys, George, is just like the kid you interviewed, who has information about the shooter and where he was and where he was moving, because what I see on television, they tend to be focused on one part of the high school, which is probably where the shooter committed this act. So the key is going to be, what intel do we have and what cameras and CCTV are in place that they can review as they move forward. It's interesting to watch the SWAT team move around. I don't see anybody in a huge hurry. So I don't want to read too much into that, George. Does that suggest that the shooter's down? They're clearing the building. I just don't know. But keep in mind that most school shootings are 5 minutes or less. Sandy Hook was less than 5 minutes.
And that does track with what we heard from Michael Katz right there. He thought it went on for about 4 to 6 minutes is what he said. Okay, Brad, thanks very much. I want to go now to our affiliate, WPLG, on the scene there in South Florida. They have been speaking with some of the victims and witnesses.
What was the last conversation you had with her? Just that she was okay?
Yes, we keep talking. The family keeps texting her, and she's texting back, thank God.
Are you a bit relieved?
I'll be relieved when she comes out, and I can give her a hug. When all the kids are out.
Are you related to?
No, we just met.
Just met. Do you have a daughter or son here as well?
9th grade daughter.
9th grade. Have you been able to get a hold of them?
Yeah, she's okay.
What did they tell you?
She's locked in the auditorium.
So they're still on campus as well. But at least you two have been able to get a hold of them. I know folks out here have not been able to get a hold of their parents.
Yeah, just keep praying.
Have you been able? You have a child that goes to the school?
Yeah, she's texting me right now. She keeps saying that she keeps telling me to stay away. Be safe, Mom. You stay away.
What's
and
going through your mind
and I'm
right
telling her, no, Crystal, I'm your mother. I'm not staying away.
How did you get word of what was going on out here?
I was actually at the nail salon, and I saw him break through on TV. It said Stoneman Douglas High School. I said, oh, my God, that's my daughter's high school. And I ran home and turned the news on, and then my husband said, maybe you should go see if you can, because they were letting some of the students out, but she's still in there.
Were you able to get a hold of her right away, or did it take some time?
She had texted me pretty, I would say fairly close to when it started happening. She said she's scared. She heard the gunshots, and she says, I don't want to go to school tomorrow, Mom. And I said, don't worry about it. So.
Did she tell you if she knew of anyone that had been injured or she just stayed in the classroom?
No, she's just been staying in the classroom. I keep telling her, please listen to what the teachers are telling you to do. And I said, well, can I call you? And she said, no. She said they're telling us to stay quiet. So.
Best of luck. Thank you
so much.
Do you have a child that goes to the school here? Or you have family here? Great.
Carlos, if you can hear us.
Lori, that's kind of where things are at here. Again, we are just south of the school at an overpass where a number of parents are basically being told to gather around, trying to get whatever piece of information they can in terms of how their son or daughter is doing. Periodically, what we'll see is a number of ambulances.
That is the scene at the Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. Right now, where a school shooting unfolded around 2:20 p.m. Eastern Time. This is being described as a mass casualty event right now. You see police outside the high school right now. For the last 30 minutes or so, students have been evacuated from the high school. It's being described by police now as an active shooter situation, although no shots have been heard for the last several minutes. I want to go to our senior justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas. This scene becoming all too familiar in America.
It really is, George. We have seen all kinds of shootings at schools, shopping centers, and again, these ones at the schools are particularly heart-wrenching because of children being involved. Law enforcement has been dealing with these situations over and over, training school officials throughout this country to be prepared. Hopefully that saves some lives today. We're working with the FBI and different law enforcement officials trying to get a sense of just how many casualties and if there are any fatalities. We still don't have a firm official word on that yet, George.
WPLG down in Florida speaking with the grandmother of one of the students inside. Let's listen.
Something, I can't believe it. I'm here visiting from New York, and I come here often.
Have you been able to, have you talked to the parents? Are they here as well?
Yeah, the mother is here with me, my daughter.
So you guys are just trying to get information on everything?
We're trying to get some information because we can't get to her. We can't get a hold of her.
Have you called and you've texted, nothing has come back?
No. Her girlfriend got shot, we heard.
You heard that her
girlfriend, yes, one of her friends was shot, so she's very nervous.
And she's a senior at the school here?
Yeah, she's a senior at the school this year.
Well, it seems that they're asking the parents to go ahead and make their way out to the park. It seems like they might be trying to clear this area.
Yeah, that's what my daughter said. I think they want to clear the area.
Yeah.
Yes.
Lori, that's kind of the story after story that we're seeing out here. A lot of parents have very little information on how their kids are doing. More importantly, they don't know just yet when the students are going to be allowed to leave the campus.
That is the scene in Parkland, Florida right now. Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, scene of an active shooter situation. Started to unfold about an hour ago. We know of several injured right now, although the information coming in right now is still sketchy. According to one eyewitness, 2 dead on the scene. Again, that has not been confirmed by others right now. I want to go back to Brad Garrett as we watch those police outside the high school right there. Brad, one of the things we've been seeing for the last half hour or so, periodically, burst of students leaving the school. Now we're also seeing some of the injured being treated outside. Massive police presence. We know SWAT teams are inside the school.
They certainly are, George. And as they get closer to the shooter, even if they think he's deceased or not, this is going to be sort of a methodical move, room to room to room. I mean, they're going to enter the room like there's an active shooter, clear it, and move on to the next room. Because the school is so big and it appears to cover several acres, I think you've seen for a number of minutes kids leaving the school, probably in the section of the school where they think the shooter is not. And so I suspect that's going to go on for quite some time. But expect this to go on for a while before we actually know what transpired in that school and what is the status of the shooter.
The one eyewitness we were able to speak with, Michael Katz, said that there were too many shots to count over a period of 4 to 6 minutes, but that it did not sound like a machine gun, like an automatic weapon.
Right. And virtually, George, with the exception of our conversations at Las Vegas, most of these shooters, unlike that gentleman, Stephen Paddock, tend to use semi-automatic handguns, or in Adam Lance's case at Sandy Hook, he used an AR-15 type weapon that shoots a lot of rounds but not automatic. I will tell you, even shooting a handgun with a 15-round magazine, you can empty that magazine in probably 4 to 6 seconds. If you've got a lot of magazines, think how many rounds you can get off in 4 to 5 minutes.
Yeah, and we have some reports of at least 20 people injured. That is one of the students WPLG is talking to right now. Let's listen.
My family, my friends.
Where were you when the shots rang out?
I was by the highway over there. Yep.
Just so happened you were on that side of campus?
Yeah.
And you knew immediately what was going on?
Yeah, no doubt. I heard it and I ran.
Have you been able to get a hold of your classmates or some of your friends?
My sister's still in there. She's texting me about it right now. She says to be quiet. And that's all I know right now.
Have you heard anything else in terms of how many people have been hurt? Or
I have no idea. I know one guy got shot in the leg. That's all I know. I heard my teacher got shot, my 9th grade teacher, but that's all I know right now.
And once again, you were where on campus when you heard the shots ring?
By Sawgrass right over there.
And when you were able to text to some of these folks, what did they tell you?
They told me that we're in trouble right now. We need help ASAP. That's all I know.
So your sense is that everyone right now is on lockdown in their classrooms?
Yes.
Your sister's still in there?
Yes.
Have you been able to get a hold of your parents?
Yeah.
Are they here?
Yes.
What did they tell you?
They told me they don't know anything. They don't know anything.
And Carlos, one thing...
I can't even begin to imagine what ran through your mind when you heard that.
When I heard it...
And we have a student on the phone now. Alexandra Robinson is joining us. Alexandra, thank you for taking the time. We are glad you are okay. Tell us where you are now and what you saw and heard.
I'm at home right now, but what happened to me personally was that I was in my astronomy class looking at sunspots on the sun my teacher was showing us. And then when we were finished, she said, you can go back inside. And as I was going back inside, I heard the fire alarm, which I thought was weird because we already had a drill in the morning. But nonetheless, I went inside, grabbed my books, and then it stopped. So I was a little confused. But then one of our principals came on the intercom and said, please evacuate the building. So I kind of knew it was like a real thing, but I was just assuming it was a fire. So we were all walking out, not running. And then all of a sudden, I heard 2 pops. And that was when I kind of understood what was happening. So I just went, me and my friends, I met up with one of my friends. I saw her. So we were just running for our lives. And then at one point, we stopped, and the security guard rolled up next to us, and he was like, keep running, go. So that's when I knew this was like a real serious thing.
Yeah, about what time was that? How long did it take you to get out of the school?
I had to run all the way to the Walmart that's near our school. That took me like a total of 10 minutes to get there. But actually getting out of the school, it's a big school, probably took me about 5 minutes running.
Right. And you say you heard, personally, you heard 2 pops?
Yes. And I don't know how close or how far they were. I wasn't able to gauge it, but it definitely wasn't that far. But I heard 2 pops, and that's when I started running. I've heard a lot of different stories from different people about, like, what's happening, like who's been hurt and stuff. So I don't know.
What have you been able to glean from your friends and others who were in the school, from text messages, from phone calls, about what else might have happened? How many people might have been hurt? Anyone you know?
I know that one of my good friends is still in the school, so I've been texting her, trying to keep updated with what's going on. But I've heard that 5 people were shot, and there's 20 victims. But I'm not exactly sure of the specifics. But I heard there's like videos surfacing of people on the floor lying dead.
And what is your friend telling you about what's happening in the school right now? What have you been able to find out?
I heard that he's in the freshman building of our school, and I know that my friend is pretty far from that, so that's good. But
you mean you've heard that the shooter is in the freshman building of the school?
Yeah, that's what I heard, but I don't know for certainty.
Try to give us a sense of how big this school is. You say the freshman building. How many buildings are in this high school?
Well, our buildings have different numbers, so there's a total of, I would say, like 10 buildings. It's like the size of a small university.
So it's a very large school, several thousand students. You believe, you've been told at least, that the shooter was in the freshman building. Have you had any information about whether the shooter is still alive, whether there are others in the building with him right now, any hostages, anything like that?
I don't know for a fact about any of those things, but I'm assuming that he has hostages if he's in the freshman building. That means they know where he is, so he probably is holding people. I heard that one of my favorite teachers was actually involved. I think she's okay, but I heard that she was helping a student, and they saw her walking out with blood on her leg. I don't know. I know there was definitely blood, though. I know that for a fact.
There was blood. You're home right now. As far as you know, that one friend is the only friend you're in contact with inside the school right now?
There's actually a few friends that I know for a fact that are still in the school, but the one I'm texting right now, that's the only one I'm texting who's currently inside the school.
And have you heard from anyone inside that freshman building where the shooter is said to be?
No, I haven't, but I was about to text one of my friends that I think has a class in there right now, or supposed to.
Well, Alexandra, thank you. We're glad you're okay. Why don't you do that? Why don't you text your friend, and we'll try and stay in touch with you. If you have any more information, we'll come back to you right now. But I want to bring in our senior justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas. Pierre.
George, we're getting some information that this is an event that is involving multiple people injured. Two law enforcement sources telling ABC News that the information is that at least 20 people have been injured in connection with this incident. Again, I preface my remarks by saying this is a very fluid situation. Law enforcement officials are still trying to get a handle on it, but the early indications are, in terms of alerts that went out to local law enforcement and to federal law enforcement, is that at least 20 people have been injured. And the Margate Fire Chief, Dan Booker, has confirmed at least one fatality. We spoke earlier to Michael Katz, a student inside the school, who said he saw two bodies outside of his classroom. I want to bring in our Chief National Correspondent, Tom Yamas, with more.
Yeah, that's right. So, George, I spoke to a law enforcement source, and I also worked in South Florida for several years. So I kind of want to break down what's happening right now from what we can see from our helicopter over the area. So this happened at Stoneman Douglas High School. Now, that's a high school, according to records online, of 3,000 people. What's confusing for police right now, at least at the moment, is that there's a nearby school, Westglades Middle School, which is about a five-minute walk. So it's possible, one of the things they're looking at is to see if when the shooter got out, he somehow was able to mix in with students or crowds from that nearby school. Now, Parkland, where the shooting happened, doesn't have their own police department per se. They contract through Broward Sheriff's Office. That's the main county police department, which is actively working the situation. I'm told SWAT team members are the ones that are on the ground there. But the Coral Springs Police Department, which is a nearby town, was one of the first responding agencies there. And they've put out a tweet now, which is pretty chilling, but they put this out on Twitter because of all the 911 calls. They posted, "Police are working an active shooter scene and ask that if you are in touch with your student, you ask that they remain calm and barricaded until police come to the room. This is for everyone's safety. Do not call our 911 or non-emergency number unless it's an emergency." Imagine what parents are thinking when they get that message. And to me, which was even more chilling, was that eyewitness you just spoke to, that student who is in high school, and at the sound of two gunshots, she knows exactly what is going on.
It is a story all too familiar right now. I want to go to Steve Gomez, also former FBI special agent, joining us as well. Described as an active shooter situation, Steve, according to one of the students there, Alexander Robertson, they believe the shooter was in one of the 10 buildings of the high school, the freshman building. Walk us through the procedures right now that the police, the FBI on the scene would be going through to deal with this active shooter.
Well, the first thing they want to do is get as many people, as many of the students, faculty out of the area as soon as possible. They don't want any more injuries. They're containing the situation. And as you can see, the SWAT teams are assembling. And we already saw, I think, at least one SWAT team go in there because they want to immediately make contact with that shooter or shooters because of the possibility that there could be other students or faculty that are maybe being held hostage and that their lives could be in peril.
What does the fact that this has been going on now for more than an hour and 20 minutes tell you?
Well, it indicates that the shooter is somewhere holed up, potentially barricaded, and it's very concerning because this is a very large campus. The shooter could potentially be anywhere on that campus, and not knowing the kind of weaponry that this shooter has, there's always a concern that the shooter could be shooting outside of windows, could be trying to sniper people. So they're having to contain the situation in a very large situation building, and they're trying to prevent any more lost life or injuries. So that's part of the difficulty that they are having, as you could see, with the students moving out there. They're trying to get them away from the area.
We're also seeing first responders on the scene treating some of the injured. Also, those police going through those piles of bags outside the school. What can you tell us about that?
Well, that's clearly a concern that there could be explosive devices, pipe bombs, what have you. And the question is, has there been some type of explosion already, which is causing that concern? But we've seen these types of situations happen many times where somebody tries to build a pipe bomb. Sometimes they go off, sometimes they don't.
Well, it's interesting that you
probably a concern.
It's interesting that you bring that up because according to the first eyewitness we spoke with Michael Katz, described several minutes of shooting, but also said the first thing he heard was something that sounded like a garbage truck backfiring or crashing.
And that could potentially be the start of the situation where the shooter or shooters may have decided, let's start with an explosion, a pipe bomb blast, which will be a diversion. And then as people are running away, then they start shooting. That's a classic tactic that a lot of these active shooters do. They create a diversion, and then they shoot as people are running around. And that's terrible. That's part of this type of tragedy.
You know, we haven't been getting a lot of information from inside the school, from police or others on the scene. Does the fact that we haven't heard about hostages from the police or any kind of negotiations, what does that tell you, and is it any kind of real confirmation that it hasn't happened?
Well, what it indicates potentially is that the police have not yet had contact with the shooter. They may have the shooter contained, but they may not actually know where that shooter is. It's also possible that the shooter, finished what the shooter was intending to do and is now waiting for the police to come in, either take them hostage or die by cop or commit suicide. There are a lot of different things that these types of active shooters have done in these types of situations. The police are considering all those different options as they are making their approach.
As you mentioned, Steve, it is a large campus. According to one of the students, 10 buildings. We're still seeing students just a few seconds ago being escorted out, walking out with their hands up. You see police there outside. One gun trained for a second up towards the second floor. Martha Radish joining us also from Washington. One of the first things we heard from Michael Katz, one of the eyewitnesses we spoke to, is the training of their teacher and other students kicked in.
Exactly, George. I think every school in the country, every teacher, every student has had some kind of training on what you do if something like this happens. They know where to go. They know what to do. They know to take cover. The problem with anything like this, it is never out of a book. There's always something that will be different, but that training hopefully kicked in with these students. You saw some of those students running out, surely in a part of the building where the shooter was not. And what they're doing now, what they're doing in those buildings is exactly what they have trained to do.
And we're still seeing live pictures right there. You see more students being escorted out. What is a very large high school campus in South Florida, 10 buildings, according to one of the students. Tom Yamas, we've seen this massive, massive response by law enforcement officials across South Florida right now, and the governor of Florida, Rick Scott, now heading there.
That's right. And you have multiple agencies responding, as you can see on the ground from the different uniforms. And you see all those kids there. I mean, we're talking about 3,000 kids in one of the schools and then 1,500 other kids in the middle school just next door. So 4,500 students potentially all coming out at different times. And this is still an active situation. We have been told that Broward Sheriff's Office is staging a site to possibly brief the media. They have not said if they're going to do it or not, but that is preliminary right now. But, George, you were getting to that point earlier. We have not been briefed, which means they're still looking for this shooter, and there's still so much unknown.
And there are still students inside. We're getting a picture there from one of the students inside, AJ 22,000 on Twitter, still locked in. I checked the local news, and there's 20 victims. Long live Major Stoneman Douglas High. One of the first pictures we've seen from inside the high school right there. Tom Yamas, the students we've spoken with so far, calm, ran out of the building as quickly as they could, but still in contact with many others still inside the school. Yeah, and in the age of social media, we just read that tweet from the Coral Springs Police Department, which told children and students there, if you're inside, stay barricaded. That's exactly what that student apparently was doing, hiding under a desk there, and even telling parents not to call 911, not to go to the school. They're waiting to get all these kids out to make sure the kids stay in. We see fire department treating some children right there on the scene of the sidewalk. It looks like the fire department and paramedics both on the scene right there. That looks like it's hard to read, but it looks like it's the Parkland Fire Department. So a massive, massive scene. Several agencies still responding and very active at this hour. Joined on the phone now by Chief David Brown, the former chief of the Dallas Police Department. We saw the response immediately from local law enforcement. Again, just as students have been trained how to deal with this, every community in the country now has emergency training for these school shootings that have become all too prevalent in our country.
Yes, George. And again, the students and the teachers are sheltering in place. But let's be reminded that many states passed laws that armed some of their teachers. And we need to really be aware as we're responding to this of who might be the active shooter and who might be a concealed carrier, someone who might be trying to help and arm themselves. So this is a very tense time to try to identify and really locate and hopefully pin down this active shooter so that we can make these students safe.
And
so
Chief,
sheltering in place is the best thing to do right now.
Chief, we haven't heard any reports of any contact with the shooter of any kind. There haven't been reports of any shots fired in the last hour and a half, since about 2:30 on the scene there in Florida. What does that tell you?
Well, often what happens is that the shooters eventually commit suicide. But you have to treat it as if he's still alive, that they do whatever they're doing, hurt as many people as they can, and then they get cornered and they almost immediately commit suicide. So the officers, not knowing what the circumstances are, have to treat this active shooter as if he's still on the loose, still actively trying to hurt people. But that ultimate outcome of suicide might be what we're experiencing now.
So there are two immediate jobs: evacuate the students there, find the shooter.
Yes, first, of course, tend to the injured or wounded if that's the case. But again, the sooner you can neutralize this suspect, the safer everyone will be. So officers won't be waiting to go and search and seek out this shooter.
Chief David Brown, thanks very much. President Trump is weighing in on Twitter right now, saying, "My prayers and condolences to the families of the victims of the terrible Florida shooting. No child, teacher, or anyone else should ever feel unsafe in an American school." Pierre Thomas, so often they do.
Exactly, George. Right now, this is just such a tense situation. And one of the things we would want to remind people as well is that I've spoke with the FBI many times, and they've done training with these local police departments. And one of the things that they emphasize is for the police to get in and engage the shooter as the first priority. Because if you can distract the shooter or shooters, you can save lives and begin to get people out. We're now, I'm expecting to hear back from a source now to get an update on whether the shooter has been found or not. As of a few minutes, we did not have reporting that he was in custody, but I'm going to do some more additional reporting right now, George.
Well, why don't you go do that right now? Meantime, we have other pictures coming in, aerial photographs there of a scene nearby the high school. We're not sure exactly what's happening there, but we see several police on the scene. Again, Brad Garrett, why don't you watch this with us, former FBI special agent. It doesn't seem to be a lot of activity, but there are, just dozens and dozens of law enforcement officials on the scene.
Well, of course. And the initial response, George, when you say active school shooter, you're going to get basically all hands on deck. I mean, look at the pictures of the dozens of uniformed or marked vehicles at the scene. So as this breaks down, you're gonna see these officers, and nobody appears to be moving at breakneck speed, because I think they already have a plan. Either the shooter's down or he's in a place where he hopefully cannot harm people. Now, I realize there's the possibility, is he barricaded in a room with other kids? I suppose that's possible. Hopefully that's not the case.
And Brad, I'm just speculating here, but we just saw from those aerials, you see these police cars now in a neighborhood that seems to be down the road and across the highway from this school. One of the things we've seen in past shootings is the police go to the home of the suspect who may have been identified to see what they can find there immediately.
Of course. I mean, the real key is intel. What do you know about the shooter? What did he take to the school? What weapons were in the house? Does he know how to build explosives? Does he use explosives? Is he proficient with firearms? I mean, all of those things you want to know, because if in fact he's still alive, it informs how you may approach him.
And Cecilia Vega at the White House, we just read that tweet from President Trump. This has the White House scrambling as well?
Yes, and certainly you can imagine here in this White House that the televisions are on for this president and that he is seeing these scenes that we are all watching as a nation right now as well. We are told by this White House that the president is actively monitoring this situation. We know from Florida's Governor Rick Scott that both of them has spoken. The governor has given President Trump an update. We've also, within the last few minutes, heard from the First Lady, who says that she joins the president in extending her thoughts and prayers. We are hearing from a symphony of congressional delegations from Florida as well, from Marco Rubio, a number of House members as well, who say they are all actively monitoring this situation. President Trump, in his short tenure so far this year in office, has spoken about mass shootings 3 times. 3 times he has addressed the nation about mass shootings. President Obama, in his 8 years in office, had to do this 17 times, George. We have seen in recent years in our country a bit of a pattern unfold in Washington in the wake of these shootings as well, where we hear in the days after the calls for gun control, and then we hear the discussion over mental health. And on both sides, I think one unifying agreement here is everybody is wondering how often, how many more times are we going to have this conversation as a nation. Representative Frederica Wilson, George, just very quickly, and I'll wrap, says that she is from Florida. This is heartbreaking that these violent incidents continue to take place in schools, a place where our children should feel safe. And as you were speaking, the president tweeted again, just spoke to Governor Rick Scott. We are working closely with law enforcement on the terrible Florida school shooting, to the point that Cecilia was just making. We've also heard from Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut. Of course, that is the scene of the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting. He is telling people to turn on your television right now. You're going to see scenes of children running for their lives. It's what looks to be the 18th school shooting in this country, and we have not even hit March. Pierre Thomas, 18 school shootings, the mid-February. Although, Pierre, as you speak, what I do want to point out is it does appear that the police may now have someone in handcuffs there, don't have a clear view of that. You were also trying to get some more information from your sources.
We're still working at George, but to pick up on your point, 18 shootings so far this year. We've seen shootings in schools. We've seen shootings at malls. We've seen shootings in movie theaters. Virtually every place that we call sacred, including churches. We just recall that massive shooting in a church just a few months ago. This is now part of the national norm in this country, where people who have various issues, be it mental health issues, be it terrorism issues, be it just grievances, take out their carnage on people in the most vulnerable of situations, so-called soft targets, as we've heard so many times, George.
It really is the kind of thing where you have to stop for a second, take a step back, take a deep breath, and think about what that means. 18 school shootings this year. It's February 14th.
Exactly, George. Some of these will involve, students in situations where there's disagreements and guns are pulled out, but it doesn't change the fact that those we cherish the most, children, are now seeing these kind of instances happen routinely, George.
And Brad Garrett, I want to bring in our former Special Agent Brad Garrett as well. We do see those police, that it does appear that they may have someone in handcuffs right there, but we're still being told this is an active shooter situation.
Right. Until, George, they absolutely know that it's just one shooter. You may have somebody in custody. All the intel may tell you it's just, one student. But until you actually know that, you're going to treat it as unresolved.
Unresolved. And as you said, they're right now going to be going through every room in every building of that school, step by step, piece by piece, until they're sure that everybody is out.
Exactly. And in particular, the building where the shooter is, because my sense is, as you and I talked a few minutes ago, that the shooting may be concentrated in one building.
Right, and then we did hear from one of the students on the scene, Alexandra Robinson, that she did believe, according from others that she was hearing from in the school, that the shooter had been in the freshman building, had been isolated in one of the buildings.
And that makes total sense, based also on the fact that we had a lot of shots and then we didn't have anything, which would suggest, going back to Virginia Tech, Cho basically went onto one floor of the building and went room to room, and we know what he did.
President Trump is weighing in again. Want to put that up on the screen? Well, we did put that. We already showed that. That was just spoke to Governor Rick Scott, and I'm being told another one is coming in right now as well. Just spoke to Governor Rick Scott. We are working closely with law enforcement for this terrible Florida school shooting. So that is what we hear now from President Trump. It's coming up on 4 p.m. Eastern Time right now here in New York City, as we are watching those live pictures there from South Florida, from the Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, where at around 2:20 p.m. this afternoon, a school shooting unfolded, still being described as an active shooter situation. According to police on the scene, it is a mass casualty event. Reports of up to 20 people injured. Police have confirmed at least one dead, according to one student we spoke to inside the school. That student also saw two bodies outside his classroom. We've seen police for the last hour or so treating some of the injured. There you see one being wheeled away on a stretcher, evacuating students from the school up until moments ago. Parents in text contact with their students who are still in the school. Many have been able to escape, but this is a very large high school. This high school has 10 buildings, several thousand students. According to Michael Katz, one of the students we spoke with, the shooting went on for about 4 to 6 minutes, too many shots to count. He said in several different locations of the school. There you see the students running out of the school. They've been running out in periodic bursts over the last hour or so. This, as we said, this is still being described as an active shooter situation. We've seen pictures of one person being taken into custody. We don't know yet whether that was the shooter because, as we said, the police are still treating this as an active situation. So much concern there in South Florida right now. Tom Yamas, you reported from there for many years, and you've seen a massive response over this last hour.
Yeah, and I was talking to a law enforcement source who told me the Broward Sheriff's Department, which was one of the leads in this investigation, has trained for these types of situations with both the Miami Police Department and other agencies throughout South Florida. This is a picture that we saw earlier. This seems to be a young person in handcuffs. It's still a little far for us to see the exact age, but one of the theories they were working, I'm told, by a single source, one of the theories they were working at the time, and this stands to reason, was that the shooter possibly was a young person. We're not sure if it was a student or someone who went to another school, but that was one of the things they were following immediately because they weren't sure who the shooter was. Now, again, part of the mix-up and part of the confusion here, because it has been a long time since we've gotten any word from any police agency about what's going on, is that there were so many students at both these schools. The school where the shooting happened, Stoneman Douglas, 3,000 kids, and the nearby West Glades Middle School, 1,500. Again, Parkland, where this happened, they have their own police department, but it's contracted through Broward Sheriff's, so it's a county police department, and then neighboring Coral Springs has a larger police department that ran over there. And you can see a student right there just overcome with grief, having to live through this, going to high school one day in the middle of the week and dealing with possibly up to 20 students and or faculty injured in the shooting.
We saw an instant response from police on the scene, from police throughout the area. We also learned from some of the students inside that the students were able to react quickly, students and teachers both able to react quickly. So many schools have now trained for this kind of incident. Everybody taught to get down, get out if you can, get down if you must, barricade yourself inside. According to one of the students that we spoke with earlier, it sounded like one shooter, but could not be sure of that, and we have not heard any reports of more than that right now. We've just been joined here at the desk now by Ray Kelly, the former chief of the New York City Police. We've been talking about the training. This is something that is drilled through every law enforcement agency in the country.
Exactly, George. Unfortunately, it's a reality now that police departments have to practice for this, and they do indeed practice extensively for it. I think there was looks to me like the appropriate response. As was said before, it's multiple police agencies involved. They now practice that coordination. Is very important that they're all talking the same language, all on the same radio frequency, that sort of thing.
And Ray, our affiliate WPLG down in South Florida is now reporting that the shooter is in custody. We have not confirmed that ourselves, but that is being reported in South Florida by WPLG. And Ray, that would explain why we're not seeing a lot of hectic activity.
Right. Things look fairly calm. Obviously, if he were not in custody, there'd have to be a lot of concern about his ability to shoot out a window and shoot for a great distances. So it looks like things are under control, and obviously that's good news. And again, I think the training and the practice that police departments do paid off in this situation. But this, by all accounts, is the 12th police shooting, school shooting that we've had so far this year. That's incredible.
18
We're halfway into
shootings on February 14th.
Amazing.
Steve Gomez, former FBI special agent, also joining us now. So, Steve, as we said, WPLG, our affiliate down in South Florida, is reporting that the shooter is in custody. Walk us through the next steps that FBI and law enforcement on the scene would take.
Well, if that is one of the suspects, then they are clearly doing a fast investigation on that individual, because they're going to try to figure out, does he have associates, and is that the only shooter that was involved? So interviewing all of the students and faculty who may have heard or seen what occurred is going to be very essential to try to figure out, was it one shooter, more than one, what type of weaponry, and so on. Do they have the right shooter, this kid in the burgundy shirt? And then they have to figure out if there are others out there, and that could expand the investigation. But everything has to be done as fast as possible in the event there is still a suspect out there.
And Brad Garrett, again, if this report from WPLG is true that the shooter is in custody, relatively unusual ending to a shooting incident like this.
It is, George, because typically it's they shoot themselves or they make the cops shoot. So, is this a situation where the police got to him before he could do one or the other? That remains to be seen. And it really goes partly to what his motivation was in committing this shooting.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about. The question is, was it something targeted against specific students, or specific students, or was it just sort of an outburst of anger, rage?
It goes both ways. Typically, when you have a small number of people shot, it's usually personal. It's usually directed at a teacher, at particular students, etc. When you have more mass casualties, where somebody just walks into a room and starts gunning people down, which sounds like what you have here, this is sort of more global rage toward the school.
And
go ahead.
And Brad, the profile is something that we see time and time again. Young men, generally isolated, harboring some kinds of sometimes mental illness, but also a lot of rage, and then they just burst.
Well, it's a buildup. It's not like, I'm going to decide tomorrow to do a school shooting. I'm going to decide for several months I'm going to do a school shooting. And as it goes through, he feels anger, he feels rage, he feels powerless. And so what do you do if all those things are going on? You seek revenge and you gain power. And what's the ultimate power? Killing people.
Brad, why boys, not girls?
Because boys tend to be more aggressive. I mean, it's just heredity, it's history. We tend to be more physically aggressive than girls. I will tell you, not necessarily in these mass shootings you and I talk about, that women are becoming more aggressive as far as other shootings. Homicide rates a little bit are up in reference to women. Women participating in violent crimes historically that were exclusively men, they're now operating. So, but to go to your question, I really think it's just how men demonstrate and get there. This is how they deal with their anger and rage, versus a girl may send some awful texts to people and make them feel bad.
Pierre Thomas, our senior justice correspondent. We've seen training across the country. We've seen training inside schools. We've seen training of law enforcement. We've seen the number of shootings go up every single month.
We have, George, and one of the things, if they have the suspect in custody, they will do a extensive background check immediately, because one of the things they would want to figure out is, does this person have any ties to terrorism? I've been on the phone with multiple sources in the last hour. No one is pointing to that at all. They are working under the assumption that this is probably someone who's somehow affiliated with the school, someone young, is one theory that I'm being told about, George. And one of the things that they're seeing over and over in these cases, as Brad has talked about, is that young people, typically male, disgruntled, with access to weapons. And we've talked about this before, George, and the fact that there are already 300 million guns that have been sold in this country. So this is an issue that's a vexing issue. It's a chronic problem of violence.
We want to go back to our affiliate WPLG on the scene, talking to some of the parents of the students in the school.
But I think it's going to be the Marriott. At least that's what she said, but she's not on the bus yet. But she sent me a picture and she's okay.
Did you get wind of this before you heard from her?
I was actually on a call with work and my phone was kind of blown up from my wife. And I got off, called her back, and I saw the text messages. So I went and parked at the elementary school. My wife's at the elementary school, and they're on lockdown as well, code red. So she was in a student conference, and so they're stuck in there right now, hopefully being protected.
Was she able to tell you, did she hear anything, see anything? She just get shoved in a classroom?
She said some of her friends saw something, but I don't, I'm not going to say anything about that.
As a parent, how much of a sigh of relief was it when you at least were able to get that?
It's pretty good. It was a little emotional in the beginning, but I think it was a good set of emotions running through my head, because you don't know what to expect as I was walking up here. And I was comforted a mother over here who has 4 sons going here, and she heard from 3 of them, and the 4th one she hadn't heard from yet. and she was very upset. So I was comforting her for a while, and it sounds like that he's okay, and she's going to meet him.
So your daughter's telling you that they're taking her where to?
Heron Bay Marriott.
Okay, so that's the second location that we've heard.
Okay, good.
Because they also told us about the park a little bit.
Yeah, so that's what I heard, so I was going to head over that way, but she just told me to meet her at the Marriott.
Did she tell you
Hearing from a relief parent right there, and you know, so many parents so desperate to be in touch with their students who were inside that school, to know they were safe. They use their phones, they text. But Martha Raddatz, you're saying the students should not tweet.
I don't think it's a good idea at all to tweet, especially if they still had an active shooter in that school or they didn't know what was happening. And considering they were still on lockdown when they were tweeting, it's not a good idea. Anybody can read those tweets. You can, the shooter may have been reading the tweets.
And we've seen that, Martha, we've seen that in the past with the Orlando shooting now more than a year and a half ago. We know the shooter was following the coverage.
Exactly. Following the coverage, listening for the sounds from the classrooms. It is a very dangerous thing to do. I know young people are on social media all the time. We're all on social media all the time. But you shouldn't give anybody any information. Certainly if you're in a place where you feel safe and you want to text your parents and tell them that, and they can pass that on to the police force. But putting something like that out on social media until this is absolutely over, until we know. And we're watching those scenes of the students coming out. Look at those students, George. They all know what to do. They either put up their hands in the air, they touch one another, they follow each other out. This is something I would say every one of those students has seen before in their lifetime, over and over and over again. But even though you're trained, when it really happens to you, then you have to put all those lessons to bear, and that's what those kids seem to be doing.
There had been some kind of a drill earlier in the day at that school. Tom Yamas, you've been in touch with sources down in Florida?
Yeah, some promising news and also some very sad news. First, the promising news. WPLG, our affiliate down there in Miami, is reporting that the gunman has been arrested, that aerial shot we had of the person in the burgundy shirt indeed was the gunman. This, of course, is according to WPLG. This is very preliminary in the investigation, but this is what our local affiliate down there has been told. That being said, and what you and Martha were just talking about, several students from the school are now tweeting that they are being let out of the school, that they are okay. That being said, Senator Bill Nelson has reportedly said there are many deaths in this case, many fatalities. Those were his exact words.
That's coming from Florida Senator Bill Nelson.
Who has been briefed on what happened.
Right now, we've heard from other police that one person confirmed dead. From an eyewitness on the scene, at least 2 others dead. But these are the first reports. We do know from earlier reports from the police up to 20 injured.
Yeah, there are also local media reports that are circulating now that we haven't confirmed yet, but that are out there that we are working to confirm that that person you saw in custody there, who looks to be a young person, was a student possibly at one of the 2 schools that are next to each other. Now, if that were to be the case, that would stand to reason why it would be so difficult for police to find this kid so quickly, be so hard, because like we said, possibly 4,500 students out in the streets.
And the Broward sheriff is now indeed confirming that the shooter is in custody. We believe that's the shooter right there in the burgundy shirt. So this is no longer an active shooter situation in South Florida, but Tom Yamas, it is a mass casualty event. It is a serious one.
Yeah, and from the sources that we've heard, and we've confirmed this with 3 different sources, there are at least 20 injuries, at least 20 people hurt. From Senator Bill Nelson, we know that there are, quote, many deaths, many fatalities. He was briefed by the superintendent of the Broward County schools. So that's a horrible piece of news right there, especially for so many parents that are home and were actually told, don't call 911 because the lines were so jammed, because so many parents were concerned about their kids, like any parent would be. They were told to stay there and wait for their child to leave the school, which any parent, I mean, you're a parent, I'm a parent, that'd be impossible to do.
Ray Kelly, former New York City police chief, the shooter now in custody. We see that picture right there. Now the police have to try to figure out why.
Yeah, I would bet that there's an element of bullying involved here. We've seen it in so many cases. Someone is real or perceived that they're being bullied. They think about it, they plan it for months, and they act out. And, you know, we don't know for sure, but I'm pretty certain there's an element of that here.
Right. And Brad Garrett, we've seen this also from school shootings that have been thwarted, not only the ones that are carried out. An element of planning going into this, as you say, building up the resentments for weeks, maybe months, putting the whole plan together, and then one day something snaps.
Something snaps, but here's what happened, George. he has told other kids, maybe not that he was going to go commit a mass shooting today at school, but his anger, his rage, his darkness, his maybe focus on particular students or particular groups within the school are going to be out there. These are teenagers. They talk through social media. They text each other. So we're going to have to see. That's all going to break down at some point as to what exactly did this kid say to others before the shooting occurred. And as you and I talked a few minutes ago, what's his access to weapons? How did he get the weapon or weapons that he had today? It is always the question in every one of these shooters, and it's usually the answer, they're readily available at home.
Readily available at home, and we've also seen there have been so many loopholes in the whole background check system that so many people who shouldn't be having guns are indeed able to buy them right now. It does appear from what we know right now that it's no longer an active shooter situation, that this student the shooter did act alone. But before we go back to you, Brad, we believe this is the superintendent of the local school district. So let's listen into WPLG.
Superintendent, I know this has to be just a horrible day, a nightmare for everybody. Tell me what you know at this point.
Well, first, I can't tell you that we can't do anything other than put our prayers out for the families, the students in the school, and this community. It's just a heartbreaking tragedy. What we do know at this point is that every single law enforcement entity in Broward County is on the scene, including the FBI. There are fatalities that are involved. We can't confirm the number at this point. I am in communication with Sheriff Scott Israel. I'm going to meet with him now. Have been in communication with the governor. Everyone is providing the full support that they can. Unconfirmed reports now, but we believe that the shooter has been apprehended. And so we're trying to just work through all the details at this point.
Can you tell me the scenario we're hearing is this former student entered the freshman building? Is that your understanding?
I don't know the details of where the student entered, but we do know that it occurred during dismissal time. And yes, it is potentially some former student. Don't have a name yet. I can't release any information to you. But that individual, we believe, is in custody at the moment.
We hear a high number of casualties. Are you getting any indication from the sheriff just how many people may have died?
Can't confirm the number at this point, but there are fatalities involved here.
Can you tell us at least how many transports? Do you know maybe a dozen?
I don't know the number that's been transported at this point, but again, there are numerous fatalities. It's a horrific situation. It's just a horrible day for us. And
we got reports of multiple shooters. Can you confirm that?
I'm sorry, what's that?
That there were more than one shooter.
No, at this point, we have no evidence that there's been more than one shooter. The individual, again, we believe has been apprehended. I would leave it to the sheriff to provide you additional details around that.
They saw a teacher who was dead. Is that confirmed by you, a teacher shot?
I believe there's an administrator or teacher that is involved. There may be more. I can't confirm if that's been one of the fatalities at the moment.
Superintendent, this is a day I'm sure every superintendent fears, and to happen here in Broward.
It's a day that you pray every day. I get up that we will never have to see. It is in front of us, and I ask the community for your prayers, your support for these children and their families. We're going to do whatever we can to come together as a community to pull through this, and we will. And again, we're doing everything we possibly can. The students are being evacuated and released at the moment, so we're working through that process right now.
Are you aware of any indication, any warning, any hint that the students could have been planning?
We've received no warning, no indication, but again, there's going to be a thorough investigation. Typically, you see in these situations that there potentially could have been signs out there. I would be speculating at this point if there were, but we didn't have any warnings. There weren't any phone calls or threats that we know of that were made.
Superintendent, there's so many parents that are afraid to send their kids to school. What would you tell them out there?
What I would say is that we cannot live in a world that's built on fear. We have to do what we can to make sure that we provide the greatest safety measures we can for our kids. But what I'll tell you is that mental health issues.
Superintendent Robert Runcie right there of that school district down in South Florida, Parkland, Florida, the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School scene of a mass casualty school shooting unfolded around 2:20 this afternoon. The shooter is in custody, we are told, according to the Broward County Sheriff. That was what you see there on the right side of your screen as the shooter was taken into custody. I'm joined now from Washington by Congressman Ted Deutsch, Congressman from Parkland. Parkland is inside your district. Congressman Deutsch, we've heard a couple of things right now. A mass casualty event. First of all, our condolences to you and for all the victims in your district right now. We've heard the shooter is in custody. What more can you tell us?
Well, this is a really tragic day. It's a horrible occurrence. I've also heard that the shooter is in custody. That's hopefully if it's true, that's obviously good news. Now, from the conversations I've had with the superintendent and the mayor and Sheriff Israel, we need to make sure that all of the kids in the school who can get out safely, that those who need care are tended to quickly, and that the community really come together. We don't have reports on the number of casualties here, but it's a grim day. This is a fantastic school. The kids are great. I was there just a couple of weeks ago. The teachers, the staff, the parents are so involved. This is just the worst kind of tragedy, and we have to come together as a community, which I know that we will. That's the kind of community this is. But now we have to make sure that was indeed the shooter, and we've got to tend to those who need care, and for those whose lives were lost, we have to be there for the families who are grieving.
We hear that so often, Congressman Deutsch, from those on the scene in the days and hours and days after shooting. The community has to come together. The communities come together, they grieve, and then we hear it again in another school, in another city.
Right. So I've got to tell you, I was in a hearing when this happened, and started getting texts from a staffer of mine whose daughter was in Douglas High School on lockdown, and I didn't get a chance to see footage until I was standing here waiting to come on with you. And what is just so terrible is the fact that when you watch this, the video of kids running out of school with their hands in the air, and you see the interviews and you see law enforcement going in, what's so terrible is that it's so common. That's the truly awful part of this. You're right, we do have to come together, and the community will. And my colleagues in Congress have been incredible about offering their support and their encouragement and condolences. But beyond that, there is an obligation for everyone to do their part going forward to try to prevent more shootings like this. What's so awful is how common this has become, and we can't be numb to it, and it shouldn't have to wait until it's in your district to respond.
Well, I couldn't say it better, Congressman, and I know that you're in touch with everybody there on the scene right now. Thank you for sharing a few moments of your time right now. Tom Yam is here with us as well. We're now hearing from the Broward Sheriff, Tom, that so far, according to the Sheriff, we have at least 14 victims. Victims have been and continue to be transported to Broward Health Medical Center and Broward Health North Hospital.
Nearby hospitals there at Parkland, not too far away. We also know that the Broward Sheriff's Office has set up a staging area so parents can now pick up their students. Before, they were told to stay home. The kids were told to stay in the classrooms. But now that they have the gunman, the person they believe to be the gunman, that young man wearing that maroon shirt, a law enforcement source tells me he was picked up in a nearby neighborhood. And
so he had gotten out of the school.
That's what this is preliminary information. I mean, I don't know if that's exactly. I'm told that he was picked up in a nearby neighborhood and that they're now trying to go to all his known addresses around the school to see what they can find there, to see if they find any other weapons there, and just do their due diligence as investigators. But again, parents are now being allowed to pick up their kids.
And the shooting at the Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. I'm joined on the phone now by Lizette Rosenblatt. Lizette, thank you for taking the time right now. Your daughter is in the school?
She called me, I would say probably about a half hour to 40 minutes ago, that she is out, thank God. There was 20, 30 minutes where I didn't hear from her, which was absolutely nerve-wracking. Her best friend, who happens to be our neighbor, is still inside.
Still inside the school?
Yeah, well, I'm checking my text right now, and as of 4:02 p.m., she was telling me, I think we're being evacuated soon, but that's what I thought 45 minutes ago. I'm in room 722. She says, we heard the fire alarm, and we all were evacuated at first, but we saw the police running with guns and gunshots, and people were screaming, so we ran back inside. That's from my neighbor, who's 15.
What more were you able to learn from your daughter?
My daughter texted us, I don't even know the times anymore, sometime around 2:30 or so, and I unfortunately had missed the call and the text. She texted my husband, and he was home, thank goodness, and she said there was a shooter in the school. He told her to remain calm, and everything was going to be fine. He hung up with her. He called the school to verify, and unfortunately it was confirmed, so he just took off in his car. He went over there. Obviously, he couldn't get in. He couldn't get to the school, but in the area, he parked by a gas station and started walking over there. She, in the meantime, was texting me. She was telling me, she said she was fine, that she was hiding, and she just kept begging me to please call the police because she was hearing somebody crying out for help. She says she could hear the person. When I finally spoke to her, she actually called me, says it was a Spanish-speaking student, and that he was just crying, and she could hear that calling out. So she was so worried. And all I could say, I texted her, everything's going to be fine. I promise you I'm going to call the police. Just keep hiding. So I hung up with her, and I did call 911. I gave them, the details that I had. And then that was at 2:48 in the afternoon, and I didn't hear from her again for about 20 to 30 minutes, and it was absolutely horrifying because her friends got out. I kept getting, calls from parents that are friends of hers asking me if I had my daughter, and I didn't. I hadn't even heard from her. I kept texting, like, where are you? And there was no response.
That had to be the longest 30 minutes of your life.
It was horrible. So when she finally called me that she was okay, at that point, my oldest daughter had taken off to go get my husband, who was not allowed to get back to his car. I think just because it's total madness in Parkland right now, all the SWAT and the police and everything, they just couldn't get back to where they were. So I was confident that they were both going to come back with her, with my daughter. And then I get a text from my neighbor's daughter saying that my daughter was not with them and that she had walked to another friend's house the completely opposite direction. So about 10, 15 minutes ago, I get a phone call from my daughter saying she's at her friend's house alone, hiding. And I'm like, why are you alone and why are you hiding? And at that point, she didn't know that the shooter had been caught. So her friend, for some reason, was somewhere else, and thankfully the mom gave her the gate code or the garage code to get in. So my daughter's currently in someone's home. I mean, it's a friend's home, but she's in there, and she was just petrified. She's still by herself, and I called her, and I said, the shooter has been caught. She didn't believe me, I'm like, I promise you. So that's, all these kids that are out, they're still absolutely terrified. They don't have information, especially her friend that's, inside the building. They don't know what's going on. So I just texted the girl that's still inside, like, don't worry, the shooter has been caught. You're going to be home safe soon. So hopefully now that the shooter has been apprehended, the kids will be able to start making their way home because we're only like less than 2 miles from school.
And you'll be able to hug your daughter.
Oh, yes, I can't wait. I can't wait. You never think something like this is going to happen in your neighborhood. We were voted one of the safest cities. Yesterday, I think I read something like that. And then today, here we are. So, it's a scary situation, and, it's all about gun control and mental health issues. You just never know where it's going to happen.
One more reminder that no place is safe. We are glad your daughter is safe. Lizette, thanks for your time this afternoon.
I appreciate your call.
Want to bring in Senator Bill Nelson right now. He's in Washington, Florida. Senator Bill Nelson. Senator, we are sorry for what has happened in your state right now. Please tell us what you can and what you know about the shooting.
George, it's a bad day. A number of fatalities. I was told that by the school superintendent about an hour ago, And subsequently, I've just heard him in a live press conference say the same thing publicly. As to the number, I don't know. He implied that it was quite a number, but let's hope it's not. If you pray, you ought to pray for these students and their school and their parents right now.
We have
and
heard,
certainly our thoughts go out to them.
We have heard from the Broward County Sheriffs that there are at least 14 victims right now, but we believe the shooter is in custody. That's also been reported. Do you know anything more about the shooter? Have you been able to get any information?
It is an active shooter situation still because they are checking to see if there was a second or third shooter. We don't have any information that that would be the case since the suspect, they think they have him. The FBI is leading the effort, and then, of course, the investigation. The FBI will lead the investigation with all of local law enforcement.
Senator, what are your first thoughts when it hits home like this?
It's a bad day. Once we get into the investigation, how did he acquire the weapon? Was it high caliber? Was it something that he shouldn't have been able to buy? Was there a background check? All the things that when we hear about these mass shootings, we wonder about, and it's hard to even get something put into law like the active terrorist watch list from being prevented to buy a gun. So again, we'll have another round of all of this debate that this brings to mind.
Senator, the rounds have become almost ritualistic. We go through all the motions, we do the investigations, we grieve for the victims, we mourn with the families, and it happens again.
George, you're exactly right. And we keep saying enough is enough, but then it happens again.
Well, Senator, thank you for your time today. I know you have a lot of work to do. This is happening in your community. Thank you for sharing a few moments with us here with Tom Yamas, as well as we're still seeing those scenes as they unfolded earlier this afternoon. As we said, the Broward County Sheriff's believes there are 14 injured victims. We don't have a confirmed number of fatalities yet, but we do believe the shooter is in custody, although, as the senator rightfully points out, they're not going to say this is not an active shooter situation until they've gone through every room in that school.
And that's exactly what he meant. Police are telling us they're going room by room. It's a massive school. As one of those eyewitnesses, one of those students told you, they're going room by room to make sure there are no other potential shooters. Police believe they have the lone gunman in custody, but they are doing their due diligence, going room to room, inspecting that school. We do know, as we mentioned earlier, parents are now being allowed to pick up their children at a staging area. And one thing that is emerging now in social media reports is students are claiming to have known the gunman. There are multiple reports now from local media, different news outlets reporting that they're interviewing students on the scene. They knew exactly who the gunman was. Very early, we'll see if that holds up.
And we are just getting some new video now. We want to show you, I believe this was coming from inside the school as the students tried to evacuate.
Here we could see them coming.
Take a video, too.
Former New York City Police Commissioner Ray Kelly, one of the things I'm struck by as we've seen the earlier scenes of evacuations as well, how calm people were able to remain as they evacuated.
Exactly, how orderly it is. And again, that sort of says the mindset of students these days. This is now a relatively common experience, and it has to be on the mind of students. So it says something about their discipline as well, but it's a sign of the times.
And senior justice correspondent Pierre Thomas, we have the shooter in custody according to local police. Of course, the federal investigators will now kick in as well. But we should emphasize, as you did earlier, the student was known to others in the school, and there's been no sign at all that says any connection to terrorism of any kind.
Not so far, George. We've talked to multiple federal sources. No indication of terrorism. It looks like an isolated incident involving a disturbed young man. George, but I can give some perspective to our viewers right now at home who are probably wondering how often this happens. We're averaging about 300 plus mass shootings per year. And the definition, according to the Gun Violence Archive, is 4 or more people wounded in a single incident. 2017, 346 mass shooting incidents. 2016, 383 mass shooting incidents. So almost once a day, someone in this country takes a weapon and shoots at least 4 people.
As we've said, 18 school shootings just this year alone. It's February 14th. Victor Oquendo has now made his way to the school. Victor, you're about 500 feet from the school.
This is as close as you can get right now to the school, George, and just about everywhere you look, you've got law enforcement just lining every single inch of this area, and you've got students and parents very concerned. I've already talked to a few parents on the way over here just saying, look, we heard about this and couldn't get in touch with our son or daughter for about an hour. We came right over here, and this is as close as we can get right now. There is some relief knowing that there is a suspect in custody right now.
And Victor, I should say, if you let me interrupt you right now, we believe what we're seeing on the screen right now in that ambulance, we believe the shooter is in that ambulance being taken away right now. And as you said, the police believe the police have said the shooter is in custody.
Police have said that the shooter is in custody, and our affiliate WPLG was also reporting that they've taken in a family member, possibly a sibling, maybe a brother, for questioning as well. So those are the latest reports here. But as I mentioned earlier, right now on the ground, just feet away from the school, police everywhere. You can still hear sirens, the helicopters in the air, and you still got students just in tears out here.
And Victor, as far as you can tell, are all the students out of the school yet?
It's tough to say. It's such a big school. I wouldn't be surprised if they were still going through it, making sure that every student was out. But at this point right now, it does look like they're doing their best to escort as many students away, getting them down to a nearby park here so that they can meet up with family.
You're watching live coverage now of a major school shooting in South Florida, Parkland, Florida. That is video of the shooter believed to be in custody now, according to local law enforcement officials. It all began to unfold around 2:20 p.m. Eastern Time earlier this afternoon at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland. It's a large high school, 10 buildings, 3,000 students. According to eyewitnesses on the scene, the shooting began around 2:20 with the sound of what appeared to be a garbage truck backing up, and then several minutes of shots, 4 to 6 minutes of shots. That is video of students being evacuated from inside. The evacuations went on for more than an hour, although according to our eyewitness, there was only about 4 to 6 minutes of shooting. This is a mass casualty event. According to the Broward County Sheriff's Office, at least 14 injured, reports of at least 1 fatality. That is likely to climb. We've heard from one of the eyewitnesses that 2 other victims were seen dead on the ground outside the classroom he was in. There you see pictures of some of the injured being taken away just moments ago. We saw aerial footage of the shooter, what is reported to be the shooter, taken away in custody in an ambulance driving down the highway. And Brad Garrett, one of the things we just heard as well from Victor Oquendo is that a family member of the shooter may have also been taken into custody for questioning. Again, standard practice.
Well, it's standard practice, George, but what does he know? He's probably going to know at the very least something about the weapons. And if they live together in the same house, he may have had conversations with his brother about his anger, his rage, his disappointment, his feeling that he can't control his life, that he wants to take control of his life, all of the things. And I guess the worst case scenario is if he actually talked to him about planning this. Well, that obviously remains to be seen.
That's right. And Chief David Brown now joining us in Dallas as well. The shooter in custody, but much more police work left to be done.
Actually, the most difficult part of the police work starts now. We're trying to find motives. We're trying to find culpability of other members of the family, the brother, the parents, other close friends, through this interrogation of this suspect, and whether he's cooperative. It may be a long, several days of investigation before we figure out any of what's happened today. So this is just the beginning, along with notifying these parents of their young people who have been lost in this tragedy, along with what I've heard earlier is that maybe a teacher or other adults may have been lost in this tragedy as well. So this is just the beginning of the most difficult part of it.
It is just the beginning, Chief. Thanks very much. I want to bring in Matthew Walker now, a 17-year-old junior at the high school, joins us on the phone. Matt, we're glad you're okay right now. Tell us about your afternoon.
Well, I was in class. You know, it's the last period of the day, and I was just doing my work, kind of near the end of the bell. And out of nowhere, I just kind of hear banging in the hallway, so I just kind of thought it was some kid messing around. But it got louder and louder, and the guy started shooting through the little window through the door, and it was really loud. There was bullet holes everywhere. Everyone was freaking out.
Can I stop you there, Matt? Could you see the shooter?
I did not see the shooter, but I did. But he did shoot through my class.
He shot into your classroom. Was anybody in your classroom hit?
He wasn't. Yes, there was kids injured, but he couldn't get inside because the door was locked. But he was shooting through the glass.
And could you tell how far away he was from the door?
I cannot. I couldn't see him.
About how many shots did he fire into the classroom?
I'd probably say 10 to 12.
10
it was a lot.
Boy, those 10 to 12 shots, even though I'm sure it happened very quickly, it must have felt like forever.
Mm-hmm. Well, like after that, he kind of just went to other classes and did the same thing.
Do you have any sense of... Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, he was just going to class, just shooting at random kids. And when the police were escorting me out of the building, there was a dead... I don't know if he was dead or not, but there was a dead guy on the floor next to me.
How long did you hear shooting going on?
2 minutes. 2-3 minutes.
And then he just kept walking from classroom to classroom. And tell us about the condition of the students in the classroom with you.
Well, mostly everyone was okay in my class, but a few kids were injured.
Not seriously?
Well, I think one was serious, but the others, I don't know.
Then tell us what happened afterwards. When were you able to get out of the classroom?
Well, when the cops came in, like 5 minutes, so they were quick about it. And when they got here and everything was like clear, they came in our class, made sure we were all okay, and they evacuated all of us.
Since you've been out, have you heard anything more about the shooter or anything more about your friends and classmates in the school?
Well, I heard that the shooter was a formal student at Douglas. And his Instagram, he has an Instagram, and everything he posts is about weapons, and it's sick.
You say, tell us more about that Instagram from the former student.
Well, I only saw a picture of it, but there's just like all he does is he's just posting his weapons and stuff on his Instagram, like kind of like, you know, showing off his knives and guns and stuff like that.
Oh my goodness! And you were able to take some video. I think we're going to try to show this right now. Can you tell us what we're seeing here? What we're able to shoot?
I was kind of on the side of the class, and he just started shooting through the door at the other kids in the other corner.
Boy, that is a lot of shots in a short period of time. Just a terrifying few moments there, Matthew.
I know, it was awful.
How are you doing now?
I'm okay. I'm with my mom. We're safe.
Have you heard anything from any of your other classmates? Are your friends okay?
So far, all my friends are okay. And I just hope everyone, you know, goes through it and just pray. You know, I'm blessed to be alive.
You are blessed to be alive. And Matthew, thank you for sharing that with us. Go hug your mom. I know this is a tough time for you right now, but thank you for telling us what happened, for giving us that scene inside the classroom. I'm here with Tom Yamas and Ray Kelly. It just shows, boy, when you get inside that classroom, put yourself in the perspective of those young students. As Matthew said, this was the end of the day. They're just wrapping up their day, and then gunshots through the door of your classroom.
Absolutely. And he seems very calm and collected. Obviously, what a traumatic experience that is. He'll have it for the rest of his life. But thank God those doors withheld the shooting or his attempt to get in. It sounds like he only was able to shoot through the glass.
And we've been talking about this all day, Tom Yamas. You know, the doors lock immediately. All the students following the training they've been given, and that saves lives.
Not only that, but that the students realized immediately what happens. Usually when we cover these mass shootings, adults will tell you it sounded like fireworks. It sounded like the back of a car or something. But these students have now lived through so many of these shootings. They've seen it on television since they were born almost, because we've had so many of these school shootings. They knew exactly what has happened. I do want to point out something else, George. A pattern is starting to emerge, at least from the eyewitnesses, from the students who were in that school, claiming, and it's still very early, but claiming that this was possibly a student or a former student that may explain how this shooter got into the school in the first place.
We did hear from at least Matthew Walker that detail of the Instagram of that former student showing off guns, weapons, knives. We believe this is the ambulance that was transporting the shooter, now pulling up to the hospital. We couldn't tell from the earlier video we were seeing of him being handcuffed that he had been injured. But Tom, are we learning anything more about that now?
I've been trying to ask my sources exactly what happened to him, if he was injured. He didn't look like he was injured, but it looked like he had trouble standing up. Also, I don't know if this is connected or not, but in Florida, they do have the Baker Act where when police think somebody is mentally ill, they can take them to the hospital immediately. I'm not saying that's what happened here, but that does exist in Florida. That's a state law. But we also know he did have some trouble standing up after the shooting.
And we just see this, whoever that was is now being wheeled into the hospital right there. Pierre Thomas, of course, ATF is going to get involved now, try to find out a lot more about these weapons.
Get a huge priority, George, and they typically can find out within 24 hours or less where these guns came from, if they were bought locally, if they came from parents or friends, and that will be a key element in helping them put together the picture of how this went down. But one of the things that sources are saying already, George, is that guns are so widely available that will be a part of the story, but something that they expect that this person had easy access to the weapons, George.
We have more video coming in now of one of the students at Douglas High School speaking about a teacher who was injured.
I was in the with your teacher. What happened? He was shot because everyone got out of the classes because we thought it was a fire drill. But then I don't know what happened. Just everyone started running back to the class, and then I just ran.
What's your teacher's name?
Mr. Beagle.
Mr. B?
Beagle. He's a geography class.
How do you know he was shot?
Because we saw his body for 30 minutes. We were just praying and crying, and then the police came and we just got out. No, I have no idea. I didn't see anything. I just saw his head because he was blocking the door, so the door was so open all the time. I don't know how we're alive.
One of the students there at Douglas High School, her teacher was shot. We did get some video just moments ago from Matthew Walker, a student in the school who was in one of the classrooms where the shooter started shooting, when the shooter started shooting inside the classroom through a locked door. Take a look.
Holy
Oh my God!
Appears to be more than a dozen shots right there. I want to bring in former Special Agent Brad Garrett. The stories are lining up right now from several eyewitnesses. What started like some kind of a boom or a commotion followed by shots, and then the shooter going methodically from classroom to classroom for several minutes, thankfully at times finding locked doors, which limited the injuries.
Exactly, and it reminded me immediately, George, of Cho at Virginia Tech. He chained the doors shut so police couldn't get in and went methodically room to room, and he was able, obviously, to get into the classroom. So locked doors or reinforced doors, I'm sure, saved a number of lives today.
And we've seen so many school districts now implement so many security measures because of the prevalence of shootings like this.
They have, but the challenge, George, is look at this school physically as we have aerial views of it. You literally couldn't sort of choke this into one entrance into the school and effectively have the school function day in and day out. So the ability to control weapons, knives, etc. into a school because of the fluid nature of a school is a really big challenge, which really then goes to the following. The only way you're going to stop mass shooters, we're not going to be able to do it with weapon restrictions because it's just not going to happen realistically. It's advanced intelligence. The relationship between the faculty and the students And also, as they identify troubled kids, mass shooter or not, potential down the road,
well,
you address it and deal with them.
And that gets to the next thing I wanted to ask you about. We've only heard this from one student, Matthew Walker, but Matthew Walker talking about he had heard that the former student believed to be the shooter had an Instagram account where he was displaying weapons, guns and knives.
Right. He's showing off about what he's going to do, and he's going to take on the power. Cho did the same thing. Remember all that footage he sent to NBC back in 2007 of what he had, what he was going to use potentially. It came after the fact, obviously, but that's part of the power buildup for these guys. They want us to know, they want certain people to know they're going to take care of business, and those of you that I don't like have belittled me, whatever is in his head as to why he was justified in committing the shooting, I'm coming after you.
Well, what can we do, though, when a student sees an Instagram post like that, when a teacher sees an Instagram post like that, what's next?
What's next, George, is that you report that to somebody in the school. Many schools today, George, particularly in Virginia, because of Virginia Tech, actually have what they call threat assessment teams. They're usually made up of the community resource police officer assigned to the school. This high school may have more than one, a psychologist, people from the school, and maybe even some students. And as they hear about troubled kids, because let's face it, these kids don't all of a sudden decide they're going to be a mass shooter. They have troubles. They have issues. They don't get along with people. They're mad. Some of that's got to be addressed on the front end. So it's a combination of identifying kids that need help, but most important, that information gets to the staff and maybe the police officer at the school. You got a kid that's flashing guns on Instagram, you got to address it.
Steve Gomez, also former FBI special agent. One of the things that's been puzzling us as we've watched this unfold over the last couple of hours is we had first heard that the shooter was inside the school, perhaps in the freshman building, but we saw him being arrested, looks like a couple of blocks away.
Yes, and that was a big concern when you respond to this type of situation. You want to try to create a perimeter to where nobody can get out, especially the suspect. And it looks like the suspect was able to make it out into a nearby neighborhood. It was probably an essential piece of intelligence that was given to the police by one of the students or faculty that probably led them to one of those locations. We'll see what the investigation bears out. But the police clearly did a great job in apprehending him outside of their perimeter from what it looks like.
And it's hard to imagine how he could have gotten out of the school. Certainly hard to imagine he would have gotten out with any weapons.
Well, that's where they're going to have to piece together the timeline of the events from the first shooting all the way to the last. Did he go in there and was he targeting a certain class or a certain group of students? We talk about how he was a former student. Did he have some kind of problems to where he just went in there to target certain people and then try to get out of there? And so that's something that's going to be part of the investigation, and they're going to want to move on that very quickly.
They are moving on that. As we said, a shooter is in custody right now. Tom Yamas, we're learning just bits and pieces now about that young man.
Yeah, we're hearing from the one eyewitness who told us he thinks it was a former student. Other students are telling other outlets that it was a former student, a student who went there. Some reports even say a troubled student. But there seems to be some conflicting information from what the superintendent has said as far as were there any warning signs and other reports that are circulating around there. Obviously, it's so hard to prepare for a situation like this or even predict anything like this happening, even though we have covered so many of these. But something I do want to say, an update now from Senator Marco Rubio, who apparently has been briefed on the situation. And, George, this is a very grim tweet. He writes, "Just spoke to Broward School Superintendent. Today is that terrible day you pray never comes."
It has come to Broward County, Parkland, Florida, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. I want to speak now to one of the students at that high school, Zachary Wells, an ROTC student at the school. Zachary, can you tell us what you were able to see and hear and where you are right now?
Yes, I was leading some kids out from. Yes, I was leading some kids out from the classroom. We were heading over towards the 1300 building, which is where the shots happened. I heard 2 or 3 shots, and some custodians came up saying to go the other way. So we ran over back into our classroom and kind of barricaded ourselves in there. The police eventually came and got us, and now I'm out on the street just trying to get home safe.
What exactly did you hear? How many shots did you hear fired, or could you hear anything?
I heard the 2 or 3 shots, and at first I thought they were fireworks. I saw the custodians, and there was one kid that was a little bit further ahead of me, but I just thought they were fireworks at first, and then I realized they were gunshots, and everyone in the class just sprinted back to the classroom, and we barricaded ourselves up in there.
As far as you know, was the shooting contained to that one building?
I believe it stayed in that area, yes, and then from what I heard, he dropped his rifle, and he made his way out with the other students that were being evacuated. He walked over to Wyndham Lakes, which is actually pretty near. Well, I live in Wyndham Lakes, and he was arrested at a common little mud hole there. It's a Florida Power and Light area.
We actually saw the video of him being arrested. We're not prepared to name the shooter just yet, but you say you believe you know who it was. You know something about this former student?
Yes, I know who it was. We got a picture of him, and we were actually sending it around to the different officers and whatever what contact info that we had for them to try and get the photo out to them so that they could get him apprehended fairly quick.
You have a picture of him with the gun in his hand?
We don't have a picture of him with the gun in his hand. We have a picture of him. It's a composite photo from a previous year that he was in from being at the school.
And how do you know it was that person?
One of the kids in the class, I'm good friends with him, his name's Colton Hatch, was on the phone with some police officers, and they gave us information that his name, of his name, and we looked for his name and found a very similar one, and found a picture of him in a school composite photo and sent it out to the officers.
So you sent it to the officer, but you didn't know the former student personally?
I did not know him personally. I had seen him before. I had seen his face. But I had not talked to him or really known him at all.
So you didn't know much about him?
No, I didn't know much about him. One of my friends said that he used to follow him on a social media account where he would regularly post videos of him with guns and knives and things like that.
We have heard that from others as well, from Matthew Walker, another student at the school. But again, just to emphasize, as far as you know, this is a former student at the high school.
Yes, he was a former student. One of my teachers said something about him either transferring or being kicked out of the school. I'm not sure which it was, but yes, he did used to go to our school.
Okay, well, Zachary Wells, thanks very much for your time. We are glad you're okay. Brad Garrett, I want to go back to... Excuse me, now we're just getting a video of Sheriff Israel on the scene there from WPLG. Let's listen.
I want to start out by saying this is a catastrophic, an unbelievably catastrophic day in Broward County history. It's devastating. I'm sick to my stomach. We have multiple casualties. We've had approximately 14 people transported to area hospitals with varying degrees of injuries. There are multiple casualties, though. There are folks that have lost their lives. I don't know the number right now. It's a fluid scene right now. We have multiple SWAT teams clearing all the buildings. If anybody knows anything about Stoneman Douglas High School, it's one of the biggest schools in Broward County. It's huge. It's a huge campus. So we have multiple SWAT teams clearing every building to make sure that there are no other shooters. We have a shooter in custody. He was taken into custody, I believe, about an hour after he left Stoneman Douglas, after he committed this horrific, homicidal, detestable act. The FBI and our crime scene people will be assessing this horrific scene as soon as the buildings are cleared. Right now, the buildings are not safe to be cleared. We're asking that you put out on the news ASAP that any parent who's looking for their child to please go immediately to the Marriott within the Heron Bay complex. Our deputies and other police officers are transporting these young students over to Heron Bay to be reunited with their parents. So that's where we want parents to go. I want to thank Mayor Beam, Commissioner Sharif, and Mr. Runcie for being here to support the Broward Sheriff's Office and to be with me at this terrible time. Last thing I want to say is this is a terrible day for Parkland, Broward County, the state of Florida, in the United States. My very own triplets went to that school and graduated from Stoneman Douglas. They played football and lacrosse at that school. So it's just catastrophic. There really are no words, and we will keep you updated. I have spoken to Governor Scott. He's out of state. He is on his way over here. I have spoken to President Trump, and he's offered the full power of the United States of America to help us get through this. Any questions? I can't hear you. He was found off campus. I don't exactly know where. I believe he was found in the city of Coral Springs by a Coconut Creek police officer. That's unconfirmed right now. There's so much information. Can you give us an age range of those? I can't. From what I understand, there was a time where he did attend the school. I don't know why he left. I don't know when he left.
But he was not a current student.
That is correct. He was not a current student.
When he was arrested, was there any confrontation between him and police? Did he open fire?
I wasn't there, but I was told that there was no confrontation. He was, can you hear me? Yeah. He was taken into arrest without incident.
Do you have anyone else in custody? I understand
No.
Just one. Okay, do you have an age on him?
I believe he's approximately 18 years old.
Okay, and then at least one dead?
Multiple.
Multiple, so more than one.
And you said the school's not safe right now. There's still children inside. And what if you're...
Well, I don't know. We believe at this point that all children that we know about are cleared and are outside the building. However, we don't know if there are injured people. We don't know if there are people hiding. We don't know. So we will not begin to release information or begin to open up the crime scene until the SWAT components say the school is safe and clear. When I hear all clear, we'll begin the next phase of this investigation.
Are any teachers dead or only students?
I have no idea.
You heard of Mr. Beagle?
No.
Injuries, approximately how many?
Well, I don't know how many injuries there were, but we know 14 people were transported to area hospitals with varying degrees of wounds. What we'll do is we'll wait for the school to be cleared. We'll go on to the next phase. I know this is critically important to release information to Broward County, and we will keep you up to date. But for right now, there's no more information to impart.
Talk about where the shooter was he inside the school? We've heard, and I know there's a lot of rumors that at one point there were firecrackers, and then it was a drive-by. Was the shooter inside the school in mind?
He was outside and inside at varying times. He certainly was inside. Thank you.
There's Sheriff Scott Israel of Broward County recapping what has happened in South Florida this afternoon. A mass shooting unfolded around 2:20 at the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. As the sheriff just said, at least 14 injured have been taken to local hospitals. There are multiple fatalities. Don't have a confirmed number on that yet. A shooter is in custody right now, was taken into custody outside of the school after no confrontation, apparently without incident, but was able to leave the school, according to one eyewitness, after dropping his rifle, now in custody as well. Our Victor Akendo is on the scene. One of the things we just heard from the sheriff is that the sheriff didn't know yet whether the entire school, Victor, had been cleared. Is there still activity? Do you still see students coming out of the school?
George, every single minute we're seeing more and more students making their way out right here over my right shoulder that may have been students as well. This scene here right now is still massive, huge police presence. You've got a lot of students making their way out and a lot of very concerned parents. Almost everywhere you look, people on their cell phones desperate to get in touch with their sons or daughters. This scene here behind me, the school, it is just about a few blocks that way. I'm sure you can still see the flashing lights. There's still helicopters up here in the air. The latest numbers there from the Sheriff Scott Israel, multiple fatalities. He couldn't give us an exact number on that. And at least 14 people transported to area hospitals with varying degrees of injuries here. This school, George, it is massive. It is a huge school. It's going to take some time for authorities to go step by step into every single classroom and make sure that that scene is totally secure.
They are going through room by room through that school. Of course, this unfolded around 2:20 this afternoon. As we said, we would get reports all day long from students and parents who were on the scene, waiting to hear what happened to their friends, neighbors, loved ones, as well. As you said, Victor, 14 injured according to the local sheriff, multiple fatalities. We've also gotten some video from inside the school of the moments when the shooting unfolded. Let's take a look.
Oh my God!
Well over a dozen shots there in about 10-15 seconds. Just a terrifying scene inside that classroom. We spoke with Matthew Walker, who was inside that classroom, said that some of his classmates were injured, perhaps one seriously, but there were no fatalities inside the classroom. The gunman going door to door, finding locked doors, but able to squeeze out more shots than one could count, according to another eyewitness on the scene, Michael Katz, over a course of 4 to 6 minutes. Tom Yamas, now the work is being done to find out what triggered this shooting.
That's right. And also, we're also seeing a different pattern just from the last eyewitness you interviewed, that student, and from what the Broward Sheriff just told us, and what a law enforcement source told me earlier in this investigation. Apparently, the shooter was inside the school. We know that. He starts firing, and then at some point, and this according to the three people I just mentioned, he somehow blends in on the way out as people are evacuating, and later he's arrested in a nearby neighborhood. So he used, I guess, his youthful appearance in some regard to sort of mix in with the other students. We know he was a former student, to try to escape, but eventually was caught.
And Brad Garrett, former FBI special agent, we've talked about this before. This does not fit what has been the normal profile for shootings like this, the student trying to figure out a way to escape.
That's true, George. So it sort of tells you a couple of things. That, and I think we heard this earlier, that the response time was 20, 25 minutes. The shooting sounds like it was 4 to 6 minutes. So for whatever reason, he chose to leave, maybe as some students started to run. But it does go to what's going on in his head. He obviously did not want to die that day and saw an avenue to escape and took it. So I think we'll still have to figure this out. But go ahead.
Although, Brad, I think, and I'm trying to make sure I don't confuse this with another scene, but I think the Aurora shooting, there was a concern then. The shooter then tried to leave as well, but that was perhaps to perpetrate more violence.
Well, maybe, but he could have shot that police officer. You know, Holmes could have easily gotten into a gun battle with the officers at the back door of that theater where his car was parked, and he exited, and he chose not to. So again, you know, we can't stereotype these shooters too much as to what's going on in their head. Maybe the motivators may be similar, but the end result, maybe not so much. Again, most of the time we see them taking their lives or forcing the police to kill them, but he clearly decided not to do that.
Much more to learn from the scene. I also want to go to Cecilia Vega at the White House. This has captured the attention of President Trump.
Oh, it certainly has, George, and we know now that he has spoken with Florida's governor. He has spoken with the sheriff down there. The White House was supposed to have a briefing with Press Secretary Sarah Sanders over an hour ago. They did cancel that, and I am told by my colleagues who are working with me here at the White House that reporters were gathered outside Sarah Sanders' office not too long ago trying to ask her questions about the news of day because the briefing was canceled, and she went back into her office and closed the door and said, we are strictly focused on this shooting right now. So that is clearly the guiding force of what is happening behind the scenes here at this White House. We did see some tweets from President Trump. We've seen, of course, expressing his condolences, and we know that he offered all of the federal assistance that Florida might need in those phone conversations that he has had here at the White House. And I also want to bring your attention to what's been happening over on Capitol Hill. We have seen some and heard some very emotional reaction, particularly from the Florida delegation. Tom, not that long ago, mentioned that tweet from Florida Senator Marco Rubio. And perhaps one of the most attention-grabbing moments we've seen on the Capitol in the last couple of hours is from the Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy, who is from the area where the Sandy Hook shooting occurred. And he was on the Senate floor today, George, and he told America, turn on your television and you will see children running for their lives. This happens nowhere other than in the United States. That is the word from this city right now, George.
That's the word from Washington right now, Cecilia. But as we've seen with so many of these shootings in the past, despite a lot of rhetoric in the hours and days after the shootings, not much happens in the weeks that follow.
You and I have talked about this so many times in situations just like this, from that shooting that took place here on the baseball diamond as members of Congress were playing. And in the days in the immediate aftermath of that, you hear tweets from members of Congress and from presidents, no matter the administration, calling for an end to these horrific acts of gun violence. And then the fights break out and the debates over gun control happen and the debates over health care and mental care health care happen. And it is the same debate that we have had for years and years and years now, and yet we keep seeing horrific incidents like the one that we are watching on our screens at this very moment. And George, I don't know that anyone in this city knows what the solution is.
Former New York City Police Commissioner, thank you. Cecilia Ray Kelly here with us as well. You've been involved in law enforcement for decades. Talk about how the evolution of these shootings over your time in law enforcement.
Well, I think the biggest school shooting, the one that had the most impact, was the Columbine shooting in 1999. Devin Klebold and Eric Harris. They killed 13, I think, and wounded 24. And law enforcement learned a big lesson from that shooting. They hesitated going in because the tactic of the day at the time was to wait for a special team, a SWAT team, to go in and search for shooters. In the meantime, people were being killed. And law enforcement came to the conclusion, hey, we can't do this anymore.
Move fast.
Right, exactly. So that was a sea change. And you see, the training that took place after that. You see the impact of the training even today. So it's about life safety. It's about moving quickly to the shooting. And we saw that happen in Sandy Hook, where the officers were there fairly quickly and into the building.
Fairly quickly in Sandy Hook, 26 fatalities later. But here we also heard that the police were on the scene within about 5 minutes. We're joined on the phone right now by Michael Udine, the Broward County Commissioner on the scene. And Michael, thank you for joining us right now. Our condolences for you and your community right now. What can you tell us about the school, what's happened so far, whether the scene has been cleared?
Thank you, George. I know this school very well. I'm the county commissioner for this area. I was the mayor, and all three of my children went to this school. My daughter is a senior in high school. She happened to have left early today, so she wasn't in the school, but my niece was in the school, and she's out safely also. The students are being transported out of the school now. They're being taken to a local hotel where they'll be reunited with their parents. And the scene here is tremendous amount of law enforcement response from all different branches of, state and local law enforcement, the sheriff. And they're trying to secure the area. The shooter and the active shooter situation has ended, and now it's a question of getting the children out safely and reunited with their parents.
Commissioner Udine, we've heard at least 14 injured to local hospitals, multiple fatalities. Do you have any more information on the number of injured and dead?
Those are the numbers that I have as well.
And talk a little bit about the kind of preparations that you went through as a county for an incident like this.
Well, the sheriff and the city of Coral Springs and local fire have activated their emergency crews. Their mobile command centers are on scene. The area was immediately cordoned off. All support on air around the school was completely handled by the sheriff's office, and a very, very significant and positive response by local law enforcement.
Is this something you had trained for?
Well, they're trained for it. They work on this, and they do their training to try and make sure that these kind of situations are handled. The city of Parkland has school resource deputies in every school, so there was deputies in the school to begin with, but no one can prepare for this. But, they did their best as they pushed through.
And Commissioner Udine, what's your number one responsibility right now?
Public safety, making sure that students are reunited with their parents, keeping some calm. I know the sheriff said there'll be victim advocates in town tonight, so that students and family members can speak to those victim advocates and get any kind of help that they would need in this situation. Complete tragedy. And
you're right now, the number one job is getting any remaining students out of the school, reuniting them with their families.
Correct.
Commissioner Udine, thanks very much for your time. We're glad your daughter is okay as well. Tom Yamas, you're familiar with this area in South Florida. It's hit hard.
Oh, it's hit very hard. I mean, we heard it from Senator Rubio's tweet. We heard it in Senator Bill Nelson's voice on our air when he said there was multiple deaths, multiple fatalities. Senator Rubio saying this is the day you never pray for that ever happens, and it has happened. And one thing I'm wondering about, when you first mentioned the two hospitals that these multiple victims were being taken to, one of those hospitals is very close to this school, but the other hospital you mentioned is far away, and this sort of happened a little bit earlier than rush hour, but the traffic can always be very thick at South Florida. And one thing struck me that the Broward Sheriff said just now in his news conference. He says there's a variety of injuries in those 14 that were taken to the hospital, and he was unclear if all 14 of those people were going to make it. So it's something we're monitoring here, because there are people obviously still inside that school that maybe will never come out alive, and then there are people being taken to the hospital right now that were unclear of their situation. I've also been told that the shooter, the alleged gunman, was taken to the hospital as a precautionary measure by police.
Much more left to learn about this mass casualty incident in South Florida this afternoon. We're going to go back to our regular program right now. For many of you, that's local news. We should tell you this happened at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Broward County, Florida, unfolded around 2:20 p.m. A shooter, apparently a lone shooter, going classroom to classroom, shooting more bullets than could be counted, according to one eyewitness. According to the local sheriffs, 14 wounded taken to local hospitals, multiple fatalities. The shooter in custody. As I said, we're going to return now to your regular programming. We'll continue on abcnews.com. And, of course, David Muir will be here with World News tonight at 6:30 Eastern. I'm George Stephanopoulos. See you tomorrow on GMA.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
My colleague George Stephanopoulos talked to Michael Katz, who was inside the school and told George what he heard and saw.
All right, so I was in the 1200 building, which is at my school considered the freshman building, pertaining that there is plenty of freshman classes over in that building. So it was the end of the day, and I was just finishing